for his address. Welcome.
Namaste, Sat Sri Akal, Assalamu Alaikum, good morning, Kia ora, and can I say thank you to all of you for coming here this morning to discuss what I think is a really important topic. Can I wish you all a very happy Vaisakhi, which of course is a time for reflection, it's a time for reconnection, and it's a time for renewal. And I think that's an entirely appropriate time, therefore, for us to be reimagining what the India-New Zealand relationship can be like going forward under a national government. But before I begin, can I just acknowledge my National Party colleagues that are here. Todd McLay, who's our spokesperson for Agriculture and Trade. Thank you, Todd, for hosting us so generously. To Erica Stanford, who's our spokesperson for Education and Immigration. We have Mark Mitchell, our spokesperson for Police and Corrections. And we also have Penny Simmons, our spokesperson for Tertiary Education. And I would just humbly put it to you that I think all four individuals would be infinitely better ministers of those portfolios and those responsibilities than those doing those jobs today. Can I also acknowledge the candidates from the National Party that are all here as well and say thank you so much for taking time out to be here as well. We're really proud of you and we thank you for all the work that you're doing with the party as well. Can I give a special acknowledgement to Dr. Kanti and Rajna Patel to say thank you again for all the efforts in bringing this fabulous facility together. It's fantastic to be back here again, having attended the opening of it not that long ago. But thank you for everything that you do in the community and engaging with the community so well. And can I give a very special thanks also to Sunny Kushal. I know you'll hear from him a bit later on as he talks about crime. He's been a one-man wrecking ball against this government that's been soft on crime, so thank you, Sunny, for being here. And finally, can I acknowledge Kanwal Singh Bakshi? Can I say, Kanwal, thank you so much for all the work that you have done for the National Party, continue to do for the National Party, your great public service as a Member of Parliament and the service to the Parliament, and importantly, the service to New Zealand. And I know you feel so passionate about strengthening and deepening the New Zealand-India relationship, and you're going to continue to play a key part going forward in doing exactly that task, which will be so important for us to grow our economy and get this country moving forward again. So with that, can I also finally acknowledge all our support partners, the Indian Weekender, Tirana Radio, Indian News, and the Indian Global Business Chamber as well. Thank you for all of your support. Now, the presence of all of you here at this summit demonstrates the value that each of you puts on the relationship between India and New Zealand. And my presence, alongside other national MPs and candidates, shows that the National Party also values that relationship. All of us want to see it deepen, and all of us want to see it improve. And as some of you know, before coming to politics 2.5 years ago, I had a career in business, most recently as CEO of Air New Zealand, but before that at Unilever. And in both those roles, I made several visits to India. At Unilever, it was to spend time with our great business there, Hindustan Lever, which so many of you know so well. And at Air New Zealand, it was to work closely with Air India, potentially in alliance relationships. And I have to say, I love India. I think from the busyness of the streets and the passion for cricket to the unbridled enthusiasm for commerce and entrepreneurship and to the immense talent that I've seen and the potential that I've seen in the people up close and firsthand, getting to the very top of Unilever and other organisations all around the world. And I'll say a little bit more about trade later on, but let me begin with what I think is where we are as a country and an overview of where New Zealand is at today. And I hope it's not too contentious for me to say at an India-New Zealand summit that I think New Zealand is without doubt the best country on planet Earth. And I say that because I think New Zealand has enormous and endless potential. And I came to politics because I believe that this country should be more ambitious. And if we make the right decisions, New Zealand will become more prosperous, more confident in the world, and New Zealanders will do so much better. I won't settle for mediocrity, and I don't believe I'm alone in refusing to succumb to the sense of decay that has come to characterise New Zealand under this Labour government. But during the time I've been in politics, all over the country, people tell me that they're frustrated and that they're worried. And they are anxious about things that they can't control. That includes offshore troubles like the war in Ukraine or upheaval in the banking world. But it's also domestic things, especially the worsening economy and the cost of living crisis that is harming many households and businesses, and especially with the rapid rise in interest rates. People are seeing that the Labour government has no ideas and no strategy for the economy except to spend more money even though it's rampant government spending that has driven inflation to where it is here today in New Zealand. And to put that in context, the government is now spending $1 billion more each and every week compared with 2017 when National was in government. And think about that. That's an increase of $23,000 per household each year of extra spending. And on the same hand, the government is collecting $43 billion more in tax each year, and that's $17,000 more tax per household. And that's partly because inflation has pushed people into higher tax brackets, yet Labor refuses to adjust tax thresholds for inflation. If it did, more people could keep more of what they earn. But although Labor will inflation adjust benefit levels, they'll inflation adjust superannuation, and they'll inflation adjust student allowances, it won't help working New Zealanders out by inflation adjusting tax brackets. And a national government that I lead will adjust tax brackets so you will keep more of what you earn. And I have to tell you, it's a very, very special skill for a government to be able to spend $1 billion more each and every week, to hire 14,000 more bureaucrats, and yet deliver worse outcomes. You wouldn't do it with your businesses, but Labor has been doing it now for nearly 6 years with our country. And I have to say, New Zealand is going in the wrong direction. Not only are we not realising all that endless potential we have, we're actually going backwards. And I don't accept that it has to be like this. I don't accept that the highest inflation in 32 years and rapidly rising interest rates is the very best that New Zealand can do. And I don't accept that just 2% of decile 1 high school students being able to pass a basic, writing test is okay, because it's not. And I don't accept that building a giant new health bureaucracy, while the worst ever waiting times in emergency departments are experienced, is the right priority for this government. And nor do I definitely don't accept that violent crime being up 33%, retail crime up 40%, gang membership up 56%, and a ram raid every 10 hours in this country is the new normal that we have to accept. And so a national government I lead will turn New Zealand around, because that's what we need, a turnaround. National will chart a positive course for New Zealand. That's not about left or right, but it's about going forwards, not going backwards. So in government, National will have 5 priorities. First, National will curb the rising cost of living by addressing the underlying causes of inflation. Our plan will give the Reserve Bank just one focus: controlling inflation. We'll stop adding costs to businesses that get passed on with higher prices and more inflation. We'll remove the bottlenecks that are getting in the way of business growth, like our immigration settings, which have been too restrictive. We're going to provide tax relief. We're going to bring long overdue discipline to government spending. Second, National will lift incomes for all. The first rung of lifting incomes, and especially for those doing it tough, is to move people off welfare and into work. Businesses are crying out for workers, and yet under Labor there are 50,000 more people on a job seeker benefit than there were when we left office. And we'll also lift incomes by enabling our businesses to flourish. And you know that more successful businesses are, and the more successful they are, the better the salaries and the opportunities they can offer their employees. Third, National's going to provide better health and education services. And you will have likely heard the plan I announced recently with Erica to teach the basics brilliantly in primary and intermediate schools, with an hour each of maths, reading and writing on average every day, and better training for our teachers too. Fourth, National will deliver resilient infrastructure for the future. And fifth, we're going to restore law and order, and I know that's a very big concern for many members of New Zealand's Indian community, so I do want to talk a little bit more about that. As National's leader, I do go all over the country meeting people where they live and where they work. And I hear business owners talk about their hopes and their dreams, and it's one of my favourite parts of my job, because I have to tell you, there is so much talent, there is so much drive in businesses. And people have usually sacrificed a tremendous amount, a great deal, to open their first shop or their cafe, or to buy a farm or a pub or a tourism operation. And business owners have a huge amount at stake, including the financial security of their own families and their employees' families as well. And people living on their farm or above their shop have a double concern about rising interest rates, because their business's lending has become dramatically much more expensive, and so has their mortgage at the same time. And we can talk about these things in financial terms. You know, for someone who's got a $400,000 mortgage, they now need to find an extra $300 a week when they refix from an interest rate that was starting with a 2 to one that now starts with a 6. But the hidden costs are in the mental and the emotional toll on people worried about losing their homes and their businesses. That is a very real concern. And additionally, what I did not anticipate when I came into politics 2.5 years ago was the number of people that I would meet whose businesses had been the victims of brazen crime. And I think in particular of a family that I had a chance to meet, and this was a couple that lived in a 1-bedroom flat above their dairy. And their child, who was age 5, slept on a mattress behind the counter. And one night at 2 a.m, there's a terrible crash as a car of Ram Raiders smashed straight through the shop front. And fortunately, that family were physically unharmed, but the mother, the father, and the child are going to live the rest of their lives with the trauma of that night. And it was a night which people showed no respect for other people's property, no respect for other people's hard work and efforts to get ahead. And it turned that mother, that father, that child into yet more victims of a crime wave. And I have to tell you, New Zealanders had enough of that, and National has had enough of it, and so have I. So last year I announced 2 important law and order policies. One was called Backing Police, Tackling Gangs, because gang offending and gang recruiting is behind a lot of offending. And National is going to give police extra powers to tackle gangs, and we're going to ban gang patches in public spaces. And I've also announced our policy to combat youth offending. We'll create a young offender military academy for repeat serious young offenders. And they can be sentenced there for up to 12 months, and the academies, in conjunction with community organisations, will provide the discipline, the mentoring, and the intensive rehabilitation for these young people, because we want them to have consequences, but we also need them to be able to turn their lives around and make a difference going forward. And I do care about turning the lives of those young offenders around. I've met some of them at community programs that work hard to make those right, powerful, targeted interventions. But it's time for a lot more emphasis on upholding the law and standing up for the victims of crime. Now, there's a lot more I could say about domestic policy under a national government, but I do want to turn to foreign policy. And New Zealanders are really proud that this country's independent foreign policy and a national government I lead will continue that approach and to uphold New Zealand's reputation as a good global citizen. Every country, and particularly a small one like New Zealand, needs friends, alliances, and protection of multilateral forums. Fair rules and avenues for redress if things go wrong particularly matter to us as small countries. And that's one reason New Zealand has always been an engaged member of the World Trade Organization and has worked hard to secure trade agreements like the Trans-Pacific Partnership. New Zealand's single strongest relationship is with our closest neighbour, Australia. And we also belong to the Security Alliance Five Eyes, to the South Pacific Forum, and like India, to the Commonwealth. And I said at the beginning of this speech that I thought New Zealand was the best country in the world. And I was recently reading a report in the Guardian newspaper the other day that said India is poised to become the world's most important country in the medium term. So the relationship between one of the world's best countries and one of the world's most important countries, I think, matters to each of them. The India-New Zealand relationship certainly is important to me and to the National Party, and we're going to put extra effort in to strengthen it. There are around, as Kanwal said, 250,000 people of Indian descent in New Zealand, and they now are in all stratas of our society from all walks of life, and some have been here for many years and others have just come recently. But speaking of populations, some are suggesting that India has just become the world's most populous nation with 1.4 billion people, perhaps just pipping China with roughly the same population. And both of those populations are a far cry from our 5 million people here in New Zealand. But nevertheless, the Indian community is important to New Zealand, and Hindi is our 5th most commonly spoken language here. And it's a generalisation, of course, but the community of Indian New Zealanders are hard-working, they're self-reliant, they share many of the values of the National Party: reward for achievement, competitive enterprise, the importance of education, and taking personal responsibility seriously. And in addition to the permanent community of Indian New Zealanders, whether their origin is India or Fiji or elsewhere, there's a movement of skilled people between India and New Zealand. A significant number of young Indians come to New Zealand on student visas, and India is New Zealand's 2nd largest source of international students, with 15,000 students being here before the pandemic began. And India is also our 9th largest source of visitors. And a national government would welcome more foreign direct investment to grow New Zealand's companies and to give them access to capital and expertise that many cannot find here in New Zealand. And India is also wanting more investment, particularly in its technology and its high skills sectors. The range of ways our two countries could cooperate in our mutual interest is very wide. For example, further development of opportunities for skilled workers, other employment linkages and tourism growth between New Zealand and India are all important to me and will be to a future national government. So National's view is that there's a great deal more that could be done of mutual benefit if both countries put their minds to it. And that brings me to trade, because trade underpins the standard of living of all New Zealanders. Trade is largely how we as a country earn our income, so trade and the underpinning rules-based international order that I mentioned is absolutely vital to us. When New Zealand doesn't pay its way in the world, which is happening right now, you're seeing it with our current account deficit, you're seeing it with the risk of recession, we borrow more and we lose economic momentum. And that means simple but costly changes like a weaker currency, and a weaker currency that can't buy as much, won't travel as far, and doesn't fill the car up like a stronger currency does. And increasingly, New Zealand is not paying its way. It gives me no pleasure to note, as I said, that the IMF thinks New Zealand right now has the worst current account deficit among the OECD. S&P recently said that New Zealand could experience a credit rating downgrade if we keep loading more foreign buying on the national credit card. There should be alarm bells going off, but I've seen no urgency and no focus from the government on this important economic task. And there are two ways through the problem the country finds itself in. One is actually accepting that we can't do any better and we won't do any better. And in that world, we accept that we're poorer, we continue to shun the potential sectors, productive sectors of our economy, and we watch as our living standards for most Kiwi families continue to slip. And I'll call that the Labour Party approach. But I don't accept that that's good enough. I don't accept New Zealand's only path is mediocrity and managed decline. The alternative is to actually start making our own good luck and growing our own wealth again. And I know we can do it, because if New Zealand is led by a government that embraces challenges, it enters new markets, it creates new opportunities, it gets out there, it unshackles our farmers and our growers, our exporters and our manufacturers, and says that we have to start paying our way in the world again. And I call that the National Party approach. And a government I lead will be absolutely committed to delivering a productive entrepreneurial economy where we pay our way in the world, we bring the cost of living back under control, and we lift incomes for all by growing our economy productively. The opportunities for trade in the 21st century are incredible. In just the last year, just think about this, India's economy grew by $560 billion. That is larger than the whole amount of the New Zealand economy, just 1 year's growth, bigger than the whole of New Zealand. And by 2030, which isn't that far away, India will be the 3rd largest economy in the whole world. And all of that just offers a massive opportunity for New Zealand, because with the weight of global economic gravity shifting from the Atlantic to the Indo-Pacific, we have a huge opportunity ahead of us. But the reality is we're not making the most of it. Two-way trade with India has actually declined since 2017 under this government, from a paltry $2.8 billion to a miserly $2.3 billion, despite India's economy growing significantly over that period. And I just want to put that in a bit of context. We have two-way trade with China that now equals $30 billion. So there's huge upside and opportunity for us with India. And while the New Zealand government has a policy called, quote, India New Zealand 2025 investing in the relationship, quote, it could frankly invest a lot more. And it was deeply disappointing to hear Foreign Minister Nanaia Mahuta say at a press conference last year with the Indian External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar that an FTA with India was no longer a priority. I think that just sends a very poor signal. It says that New Zealand will no longer fight for the benefits that open trade delivers, and it says to India that we don't think you're important enough to put the effort in. Nothing could be further from the truth. Doing a trade deal with India won't be easy. No trade deals ever are. But Australia has managed to achieve one with India, negotiated in the middle of the pandemic. The UK is about to achieve one, also negotiated in the middle of the pandemic. And the EU is closing in on negotiations. And I will not have New Zealand being left behind, because Kiwi exporters are now at a disadvantage with New Zealand wine, New Zealand wool, New Zealand kiwi fruit, New Zealand lamb, all facing trade barriers in India that have been slashed for their Australian counterparts. And as I say many times before, we don't lose to Australians. And it's no surprise that we can't therefore pay our way in the world when we can't affordably get our products into markets. And therefore, I'm very pleased to announce to you today that under a national government I lead, reaching a trade agreement with India will be a major strategic priority. And that's because opportunities abound, not only in opening new markets for our exporters and our entrepreneurs, but opening up new connections, new investment, and new partnerships between our two countries. And there is a perception that India is an economy of the future, but incredible innovation is already happening in places like Bangalore and Delhi and Mumbai. And it's critical that New Zealand harnesses those opportunities. Both countries produce talented graduates in fields like IT and engineering, and we have so much to learn from each other. But I don't think we're making the most of the opportunities that India and other countries offer us. New Zealand is an isolated island nation, and that used to mean that we had to work even harder and more creatively to make ourselves known in the world. But since the pandemic's begun and being led by this Labour government, it's embraced so much isolation. And I think New Zealand seems to have developed an insular and an inward-looking mindset that mirrors its geographical location. And that worries me, because New Zealand needs to get its mojo back. And a government I lead will greet the world with purpose and confidence, ensure that we can compete, and being active in pursuing all the opportunities to do so. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, can I say thank you again for being here. Thank you for taking part in the sessions that will take place today on building a closer relationship, on education, on immigration, and on law and order. These are all important in the relationship between India and New Zealand, and they're important for the Indian Kiwi community here in New Zealand as well. But most important of all are the links between our people. Those of you who live here but have close family in India or Fiji or elsewhere have bonds that stretch across oceans and across generations. And you are the heart of the India-New Zealand relationship. And so can I say thank you for sharing your love of New Zealand with friends and family all around the world. We know that first-generation migrants often find the move difficult, but their children who go to New Zealand schools quickly walk in two worlds with great confidence in both. And the number who do that is growing. And I just think that bodes tremendously well for growing the links and friendship between our two wonderful countries. A national government I lead will foster that relationship, and we will do our best to add to it with a free trade agreement and with business, cultural and sporting contacts that build on old links and create new ones. Thank you all for being here and sharing that vision. Kia kaha, Jai Hind.